Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get week 61 of today's Tolkien Times going with another Middle-earth Map Monday. We're back to following in the footsteps of Frodo and friends here on Middle-earth Map Monday, and I'm all out of alliteration now. After stops in the Shire, the Old Forest, Barrow-Downs, and Bree, we took a break to look at some history in Eregion before returning to Amon Sul and the Trollshaws last week. Today, we finally arrive at the famed Valley of Rivendell. And to start, let's go back to what was, for most of us, our first encounter with this magical place in the chapter A Short Rest from The Hobbit. Gandalf's head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for the stones, and they followed his lead, but they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last," he called, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped in the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of the pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded and nearly fell off or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Now, as we can see from this passage, Rivendell is obviously a well-hidden valley, with pine trees growing at the top, a switchback road down into the valley itself where the trees become primarily beech and oak. So we have a move from conifer trees, which typically thrive in colder climates, to deciduous trees, which grow in temperate regions. This suggests a pretty deep valley indeed, since the weather is significantly warmer on the valley floor. We read that in the text as well. The air grew warmer as they got lower. Now, this passage doesn't give us its location in Middle-earth, but Rivendell lies in the western foothills of the Misty Mountains, on the eastern edge of the region of Eriador. And now that we know where it is, what it looks and feels like, its climate, and a little about the trees that grow there, let's talk about how it became home to, well, the last homely house. In Appendix B, The Tale of Years, we learn that in Second Age 1697, Eregion was destroyed, Celebrimbor was killed, and the doors of Moria were shut. At that time, we read, Elrond retreats with remnant of the Noldor and founds the refuge of Imladris. But we can read a bit more about that in Unfinished Tales, the history of Galadriel and Celeborn. Elrond had gathered such few of the elves of Eregion as had escaped, but he had no force to withstand the onset. He would indeed have been overwhelmed had not Sauron's host been attacked in the rear, for Durin sent out a force of dwarves from Khazad-dûm, and with them came elves of Lorinand, led by Amroth. Elrond was able to extricate himself, but he was forced away northwards, and it was at that time that he established a refuge and stronghold at Imladris, Rivendell. Now later, we learn that as Sauron tried to take all of Eriador, many fled to swell Elrond's host to the northward. So much so, by the way, that when Sauron tried to take Lindon, where he thought that he could take at least one, if not more, of the 3 elven rings, his force was weakened by the necessity of leaving a strong detachment to contain Elrond and prevent him coming down upon his rear. 3 years after this, in Second Age 1700, when the fleet of Tar Minastir finally arrived, Sauron had mastered all Eriador, save only besieged Imladris. And after his defeat by the Númenóreans, the army that was besieging Imladris was caught between Elrond and Gil-galad and utterly destroyed. The next year, around 1701, the text tells us that the first council was held, and it was there determined that an elvish stronghold in the east of Eriador should be maintained at Imladris rather than in Eregion. And that's also when Elrond received Vilya from Gil-galad and was appointed his vice-regent. Gil-galad kept Narya and would give it to Círdan when he left for the Last Alliance, and then he in turn would give it to Mithrandir when he arrived in Third Age 1000. Now, Imladris was also the place where Elrond fell in love, in Second Age 1701, the same year of that council. We read that Galadriel passed through Moria with Celebrian and came to Imladris seeking Celeborn. There it seems she found him, and there they dwelt together for a long time. And it was then that Elrond first saw Celebrian and loved her, though he said nothing of it. Imladris also played host to a mighty force in Second Age 3431 as the Last Alliance prepared for its assault upon Sauron. Therefore, they made that league which is called the Last Alliance, and they marched east into Middle-earth, gathering a great host of elves and men, and they halted for a while at Imladris. It is said that the host that was there assembled was fairer and more splendid in arms than any that has since been seen in Middle-earth, and none greater has been mustered since the host of the Valar went against Thangorodrim. So it's a place of refuge, a place of love, and a place of might, Rivendell. But that's only Rivendell in the Second Age. What about its history in the Third Age? You'll have to come back next week for that. For now, folks, that wraps it up for Middle-earth Map Monday. But if you have a mailbag question you'd like me to answer in Series 9, please email it to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Send it in and let them know it's for today's Tolkien Times. I'll get to it as soon as possible, with priority going to supporters of the show on Patreon. Speaking of those who support the show on Patreon, thank you. You're the ones who make it possible for me to pour the time and resources into producing all of these episodes. Now, if you'd like to be a part of that, please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes. You can join the TTT Content Council to help me decide what I'm going to talk about. You get a bonus episode every week, hangouts, more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Please follow or subscribe on podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.